everything.
I prefer to look naturally bad.
What's the topic about?
We're moving on to should we conclude on this episode? We've been on it for ages.
Joseph,
Let's
can we
conclude.
talk to you about my video and your objection
just-
to it? Or you got more?
No, he wants to do that.
We're doing it on this.
Let's do
Can I get a copy of it?
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Because it's important to clarify.
Clip it as a Zionist.
Yeah. There we go. Clip it on this one.
I think the beard will cover the way.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good. We do our best.
I saw you walking to synagogue the other day. Hendon. Thursday.
Sorry, man.
I assumed you were going there. Odd?
אתה חלקת לבתי כנסת?
Sorry, bro. Can we go to Monte
It's okay. Alright, cool.
Okay, cool.
Do you want to conclude first of all
I
on
think
your
that-
point on anti-Semitism, or is that?
You like
this
this
is
one?
this is basically
It's
related.
tied
It's
on a
connected, I
similar
suppose.
topic. If I can introduce it, sitting down, having the chat, doing the podcast, William asked me, why is it I like Joseph so much? And I do, even though, I really do, even though we differ politically, and we know that.
Yeah.
Joseph is a Zionist, if you can't tell. And in our
not
first
ironic.
conversation that we had, I described myself as an anti-Zionist because I've been a proud supporter of the Palestinian people in their plight. And Joseph's question, well, why do you need to be anti-Zionist? Why can't you just be pro-Palestinian?
Yeah.
And in the conversation about how could you like Joseph?
It wasn't done in an aggressive way, man.
Sorry, no, it wasn't. No,
Very
it wasn't.
calm.
It was, why do you like Joseph when he ascribes to an ideology that you're against?
Well, it's that basic
Yeah.
thing that's
And I
it's kind of a bit of a paradox.
And I was
The inference
explaining.
was I was a Nazi and a racist.
We'll get to that because we'll get to that.
That's a jump.
And I explained that Joseph, as Zionists go, I think he's towards the end of the spectrum that will be most agreeable to perhaps some of the Palestinians. They might not agree with him totally, but he's described himself before as a supporter of the Palestinian people and said that he wished for their
So my position, just so people know,
Yeah, go on.
is if they achieve statehood and it brings peace,
Yes.
I'm for that.
Okay,
Like, I'm
yeah.
for peace
Exactly.
with our neighbours.
And he always does it with a smile and polite. He never gets angry. When I'm watching him debate some of the so-called pro-Palestinian people, I feel like it's Rocky IV and I'm a Russian cheering for Rocky. That is the honest truth. I can't say more than that. Will then posed a hypothetical question. Oh, well, if you can like people that you disagree with, what about Nazis?
No, it's not what happened.
What did you
so,
say?
No, it's something we should go into in
All
depth
right.
because of the purpose of the video, I imagine. So for me, it is. What was happening there is I was questioning the motives of the Zionists and what's happening in that area, let's say, and you said, well, they can justify it. And I said, well, okay, of course, they justify it. You justify them what's happening there. And I said, the Nazis also justified what they did. It doesn't mean that justifications are legitimate. That's my statement.
Okay.
We can play it back. You can play it back if you want. That's exactly
that's
what
a
I said.
misunderstanding on my half, because
I hope so.
for how I interpret it was Zionism is racism, Nazis are racist. How can you shake hands with Joseph? And so the natural the leap, and it wasn't just me, it was brought to my attention. I missed the video, and then someone said,
Okay,
Joseph, you've got to watch this. They're calling you a Nazi.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's unfortunately the video is very short and the audio is pretty clear, and that's precisely what I'm saying. Is that people make justifications for what they do. So saying they can justify it to me is not an argument.
So let's get to the
That's
root.
all.
Let's get to the root then, and just be explicit.
Sure.
Is Zionism racism?
I don't know enough about Zionism, but what I seem to see. Sorry.
I would say some Zionists are racist.
Yeah, that's fine, but
that-
some
and
Muslims are
Zionism-
racist.
Yes,
Concept.
absolutely.
But
And that's
you
why
get to the
talking
root
spectrum.
concept.
But maybe
I
I can
don't
ask some
think
questions
Zionism
to
has to
elucidate.
be
Okay.
racist.
As long as that first point is clarified, because that's very important. Because I wasn't naming you as anything.
Okay.
Because I don't know you. There is one point I do want to address, which I heard you say in another conversation, but we'll get to that. Maybe I can ask you: Is the Zionist movement specifically only for Jews?
No. But actually, it's a very interesting question. Yes and no. So anybody can be a Zionist, but the concept of Zionism is the belief that the Jews should be able to have a state in their ancestral home. It's not the exclusion of anybody else. So there's enough space for multiple states. There's enough space within the Jewish state. Like from its very inception, it's been a multicultural democracy. Like it literally stipulates that no right should be denied to the non-Jew that's given to the Jew. So they basically have the exact same rights, Jews, Arabs, whomever the minorities may be. And so, yes and no. So yes, it is the national liberation of the Jewish people, but anybody can ascribe to that ideal or that idea.
But could I go to Israel and become an Israeli citizen?
If you convert to Judaism, yeah.
But I can't.
You
But how
can,
would I
and
convert?
if you get a visa to work there, like you could in the UK, yes, you could.
No, but to become a citizen.
Yeah, you could become a citizen.
A full citizen
Yeah,
with
full
full
citizen
rights,
with full
without
rights.
being Jewish.
Yeah.
You said I had to convert them.
As an example, there's a community in Dimona of black Christians who moved there and have full citizenship. They came from America, and they've literally got a little village. There's many examples. People working in Tel Aviv, Haifa. These are big high-tech industries. People move there, they take citizenship. So yeah, there are many non-Jewish immigrants that live there.
But why did you say I would need to become converted?
Because then it's easier. If you become Jewish, then you have what's called a right to live there, and it was established that Jews could escape the horrors that non-Jews had inflicted us in pretty much every nation we'd lived.
Okay. There's some. I mean, hopefully you might be able to see my. I don't know what to say it. Tension with the Maybe you don't. You might be a religious man, right? But the concept of saying that a certain area belongs to a certain people because of their race, to me that seems by definition racist.
Okay, so let me play this back to you. Do you support the idea of Palestinian statehood?
But that's my statement. It's not exactly fair to just ask me questions
I will
and respond.
I promise I'll respond, but I just want to know, do you support the concept of Palestinian statehood?
I would imagine that would be beneficial to relations in the area.
What is a Palestinian?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, this relates back to the previous discussions I've had with many people about labelling and racial groups and ties to land, because I'm not really in favour of any of it for anybody, because I don't believe in it.
But that's fine. So in my experience, most people who say that Israel is a racist endeavour support a Palestinian state in that region. Now that Palestinian state is based on ethnic lines. So before 1948, before the establishment of Israel, Jews, Christians, Muslims lived in that region. When the Jordanians took control of the West Bank and drove the Jews out, they enacted a law which banned Jews from living there and basically created an ethnic group, the Palestinians. And so when most people say that they support a Palestinian state, they're saying they support an ethnic state for Palestinians.
Right.
And those who say that they support a Jewish state do the same. So anyone who advocates for the two-state solution usually is advocating for two states divided along ethnic lines.
Yeah, right.
Isn't part of the problem the fact that we have Druze, Circassians, Bedouins, Arameans, Arabs, Mizrahi Jews, Ashkenazi Jews, a very vast variety of different people living in one small region, and we're trying to cut it up like cake and make a nationality for one and one for another.
This perfect example. The Jews are the only minority in the Middle East, only minority that achieves statehood. Within that minority, within that small state that's established, you have more cultural and religious diversity than any other state around it, proportionately. 20%, which is way higher than the UK, 20% of Israelis aren't Jewish. Religion is protected under law, so you have hundreds of mosques and hundreds of churches. You have Jews, as I said, there's the what do you call them? The Baha'i have their centre, their Vatican is in Haifa in Israel. It's the only nation that protects those rights. And so in all the states around it, everyone was forced to take on Syrian identity, was forced to take on an Iraqi identity, was forced to take on an Egyptian identity. And in all of those lands, they purged the minority communities from them. And now there are very Christian numbers are usually in decline. Yazidis are in decline. Every minority, Jews, there used to be 1 million of us in the Arab world. Now there's 850,000. Now there's 3,000.
That makes me sad.
It's one of my favourite
I
local
have to
Muslims.
ask you some questions. Okay, so at some point you did say that you told Will that he has to convert to Judaism to have a right.
To have a right rather
live
than a privilege.
in Israel, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So don't you believe in that sense it's really privileging one race over the other.
To respond to that, in the same way that the Palestinian state was created in the West Bank and Gaza, I would think it's absolutely legitimate and acceptable for the Palestinians to open up the right to return for Palestinians around the world, and I wouldn't consider that racist.
Okay, good. Look, the idea, I know.
Join in, mate.
I know accepting it.
Join in.
Accepting it on the Palestinian side doesn't make that particular idea, the idea that they want to implement less racist. Regardless, it is.
So I'm going to leave a real simple quote, which is literally one of my philosophies. 6 million, racism for me is 6 million Jews being murdered in the Holocaust. Their survivors find establishing a refuge, a safe haven, to escape the racism that was inflicted on us by Muslims, inflicted on us by Christians, atheists, socialists, then even Muslims. I mean, there were many Muslims who were very kind to us, but there were other Muslims that weren't kind to us. And the same with Christians.
Like the majority Nazis,
but so it isn't a safe haven being created for the victims of racism is not racist.
But is that safe haven not a consequence of that safe haven for being only for Jews?
It's not only for Jews.
Right, but the thing is, does it not create second-class citizens? I know in law it says that everybody has supposedly equal rights, but at the same time we can see that there are Jews that came from, for example, Ethiopia, and there are also Arab Jews, right? In law, but at the same time, in practice, in society, do you not feel? Are you denying that there are people within Israel that treat these people differently?
Well, there's definitely racists in Israel. There's racists in the UK. It doesn't mean that the UK is institutionally racist. Okay. I'm talking.
Are there not people that claim that Israel is a land for Jews? Therefore, any other religion we ought to treat differently.
Yeah, of course there's people that say that, and I fundamentally, as one with most Israelis, fundamentally disagree with those people.
Right, see, this is the problem. They take the justification of what they are doing from the main tenets of Zionism, and this is why there are some people who express Zionism as being racist.
I don't think they take, no, they don't take the tenets from racism, from Zionism. The idea that Zionism is the cause of racism, in my opinion, is mistaken. Racists exist. So most of the racists I know in Israel are people who've lost family to Arab terrorists, are people who came within you mentioned the Arab Jews, the Mizrahi Jews. They predominantly vote for more right-wing leaning figures in Israel because they lived amongst Muslims and were chased out of their homes, and so they harbour prejudices based on the suffering that was inflicted on them. And this is a tiny minority of Israelis.
Jews during Saddam's time.
The overwhelming majority of Jews in Israel aren't racist. That's why there's so many social experiments done, which you can watch on YouTube, where people have discriminated against Muslims or Arabs in shops, and then all the Jews have the Israeli Jews have come to their defense and said, this isn't our way.
One more question from me, Joseph. You mentioned that Israel is 20% non-Jewish.
Yeah.
I'm quite proud of that fact, which is good. What percentage would be acceptable for you for it to remain a Jewish state? Does it need to be 51% Jewish, or what?
So I don't like talking percentages. What I like to talk is values and protections.
Okay.
So for me, what a Jewish state means is that the values of that state are there, and the protections are that Jews around the world can escape persecution. Now, as it's a democracy, if you have, for instance, if you had the right to return for all the Palestinians that lived outside, they came in, it's highly likely that they would vote out of existence those protections that protect the Jewish people. And so it's the same question you've got in the UK. If you bring in 70% of Iraq and dump them in the UK, the character of the state will fundamentally change. It will resemble more Iraqi culture than it would British culture.
That's interesting because just to jump in there, I'm not a spokesman for Tommy Robinson, but is that not an argument that they also make?
Yeah, no, it is their argument.
Because we were just deriding them like fuck right there a minute ago, and you made the same argument.
So my issue with Tommy Robinson.
But you know what I'm saying? That's the same argument.
So I think it's just so people are very clear what my position is on Tommy Robinson. My position on Tommy Robinson is his prejudice against Muslims I find intolerable. I think there's things that he said that have grains of truth in them. I don't think that everything he says is just fantasy.
Okay, so like you said, if they said the right to return, they went to Israel, voted out the protections for Jews, and then it would be a catastrophe all around. So you want to stop that from happening, right? And then maybe people say, well, they don't want, maybe this is not a legitimate claim, maybe it is. But let's imagine a hypothetical. You would say a lot of people coming from Afghanistan, Iraq and Syria to here, they might vote it out and change the capacity, what do you call it? The ethos of the nation.
Yeah.
It could happen here also.
So I think there
I
is...
mean, maybe it's highly unlikely, but I mean, it's a
So
possibility.
maybe we're massively moving the goalposts, but I think there's something
It's the same
incredible.
situation.
I think there's something incredible about the British nation. I think there's something incredible about America. I think there's incredible liberties and freedoms that we have here that you don't have in places like Iraq. And I think that the British people should do everything they can to preserve this incredible nation that they've built up. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to pull up the drawbridge and stop any immigration. Of course not.
No.
I think people who move to this country should be aligned with British values and British culture. I think there is certain...
Is that racist?
Well, but
I don't believe it's racist.
Okay.
No.
There's no-
But maybe you do. I don't know.
No,
Yeah,
I not particularly, no.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask you that
yeah.
question.
does that not go against multiculturalism?
I'm
bro?
not. I don't believe. I think multiculturalism is really problematic.
That's
Right,
an
but you
interesting
are
one.
okay with it in Israel.
So
are
to-
you okay with it
so-
in Israel?
So, the problematic aspect of multiculturalism
Okay, tell
is
me.
if you divide a nation and preserve distinct cultures, those cultural collectives will naturally compete with each other for resources, for material. So what you have to be very careful when establishing, and I think multiculturalism is the wrong word, to have a society that protects the rights of all the individuals, you have to effectively, and creates a very cohesive society, you need to create a strong national identity. And so within Israel, you have Druze Arabs serving in the IDF, you have Bedouin Arabs serving in the Israeli military, and every sphere of government, they all strongly identify as being Israeli. The biggest problem area in Israel is when you have groups competing, and the two biggest groups that compete in Israel aren't Jews and Arabs, it's religious Jews and secular Jews, and there is big competition for almost the soul of the nation there.
We've seen some of that.
And so for me, I think multiculturalism is the wrong word. I think I am eternally grateful that Britain took in my family as refugees, and every synagogue in the UK every Saturday says a prayer for the royal family and the government out of gratitude for granting us refuge here.
But do you
We've largely assimilated and become British, but I think those communities that segregate themselves from wider British society, they do become problematic, and they do. And so,
Do you not believe that it's a bit problematic when there are English people? These are 2 points. When there are English people that live in their own communities, and then there are Muslim people living in their own communities here in Britain, and they don't necessarily intermingle because they don't want to intermingle.
I
Right?
think that's a problem. Yeah.
That's problematic. Second of all, you made the point that if someone was to immigrate to the UK, they have to take on board some of the British values. First of all, what are British values? Second of all, what if a British value goes against their identity? Like, for example, I'm Muslim,
Yeah.
right? And the British value, for example, tells me people are free to worship whatever they wish to worship, and that means your kids as well. And I will not accept for my kid to worship any other god but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So how do you try
I think
to
we're on a
fix
new
that?
topic.
Well, there's one more point I wanted to
Okay, yeah, go
raise.
on, yeah, okay, keep going.
Sorry,
I'm
bro.
gonna give you-
Just because of the video and something that was mentioned, something I do want to ask you. So I'll take the opportunity. The building of settlements. You support it?
It depends on the settlement.
Well, because my point of confusion, you could call it confusion, is that if you say that you're working for peace, but you support those, it doesn't seem to work.
So
Like,
perfect.
why would those
Perfect.
mesh?
So basically, you're saying that you believe the West Bank should be free of Jews.
Well, did I say that?
But that's what it means.
No, it doesn't.
He's
It does.
trying to say that Jews shouldn't
here's
forcefully
the
settle
response.
there when they
Okay.
are not.
So let's take Hebron. Hebron is seen as probably the most the contentious flashpoint for violence in the region. Like other than maybe the Gaza border, like it's where Hamas. Yeah. No, Syria. No, yeah. No, sorry, I meant Israel. West Bank, Gaza. Now, what happened with the history? What's the history of Hebron? So, the Jewish religious beginning of the city was Abraham purchased some land there, purchased a field. Then he was buried there. His family was buried there, and pretty much continuously from that point, there's been a Jewish presence in Hebron. In 1517, they were massacred when the Ottomans conquered. I think it was Murad III. The Jews were then moved also from Safad. He moved forcefully expelled. Was it Murad III that forcefully expelled the Jews from Safad? No, tangent. The Jews were in Hebron in 1517. They were in there at the time when Jews had a kingdom there. They were there at the time of Abraham. And so there's been this continuous presence of Jews in Hebron, which is in the heart of the West Bank. 1517 and beyond, and then after. In 1929, there was the horrific riot where the local Arabs burnt the Jews alive, massacred them, smashed the heads of babies off walls, and 1929, and ethnically cleansed the Jews from Hebron. In 1948, Jordan conquered the West Bank and declared it part of Jordan.
Right.
The British and Pakistan recognised it, usurping the land, annexing the land and calling it Jordan. So then that region became Jordanian. Jordanians enacted a law which forbade Jews from living and having citizenship there. When Israel defeated Jordan in 1967, it retook the land, and it said that actually the Jews are able to return to their old houses. And so if you visit there's like a very famous street called Shahada Street. There's like a thing, and the Arabs claim, the Palestinians claim that the Jews stole the houses from the Palestinians, and the Jews say, wait a minute, this was our old synagogue, this was our old school, this was our old house. And so this is a settlement. It's by every legal definition. And what does it mean by a settlement? It means that a Jew, because under Palestinian law, Jews aren't allowed to become Palestinian, it means that a Jew is living in one of these regions. And so when you say, am I for settlements? What's another settlement? Well, you've got the old city of Jerusalem, the holy site for Jews, Muslims and Christians. Well, the third holy site for Muslims. But for Jews and Christians, it's the holy site in the world.
Yeah.
The international community, when they proposed the partition, said this was going to be an international city. Jordan conquered it and declared it part of Jordan. So the old city, which has the Temple Mount and Masjid al-Aqsa, became part of a Jordanian state. When Israel retook the land, because the old city of Jerusalem for at least 150 years had a Jewish majority, it said actually the Jews were allowed to come back to their most important and holy city. Now you could say that's a settlement. And I would say, but mate, we were living there before the Muslims. We built the city and we returned to the city, and we've had the majority population for years.
Okay.
And so it's not so simple as...
Right, no. Okay,
So
I understand that.
Your argument seems to be because of these crimes in 1929 and at other times, Jews are only safe to live in the West Bank if they are in segregated communities.
Not even segregated. I don't even think Jews should be segregated. I hate that Jews are segregated in the West Bank. I think they should be able... I wish Arabs and Jews could live side by side in the West Bank.
There you go.
We all wish that.
In Hebron, so 3% of Hebron is Jewish, and it's a few hundred Jews, I don't know the exact number, that actually live in the city of Hebron.
How many Arabs?
I don't know, tens or hundreds of thousands. I think it's the fourth
I
biggest
believe
city.
the Jewish community are heavily guarded by many. There's more soldiers present than the actual Israeli citizens.
Yeah, and you have to ask, but why?
You do have
Yeah,
to ask, but why?
And there's a friend of mine I wanted to bring here today, unfortunately he's giving a talk, who's the spokesperson for Hebron. He would have been perfect for this conversation. He's in the UK.
Well, something else to say, just to continue it, is that I have to admit I'm not an expert in the region, but I'm quite interested in, the morality of these situations, because it seems to me that if, let's say, the international community or the UN is saying that building more is not a good thing to do, why continue?
Because, quite frankly, I don't give a damn. Personally, what the international community said. The international community stood by while 6 million of my people were murdered. The international community cares about voting blocks within the United Nations.
The international community at that we're not as developed, right? And there are different actors, so we cannot judge the international community back then.
No, but I would say
at the same level as, or in the same way that the international community is now.
I would
just
look at
let me-
one quick.
Sorry, my battery's dead. Carry on the chat.
Let me just
Just one quick point. One quick
Alright,
point.
okay.
I just want to get his opinion on something. So when Jordan made a law making it illegal that Jews settle in the West Bank,
yeah.
do you think that this law was enacted in any way as a response to many Muslims feeling like they cannot live in peace in Israeli-controlled territories.
No, I think
So
it was enacted because the Muslims didn't want to live with Jews. That simple.
Not because the Jews didn't want the Muslims to live with them.
No,
in
because
places
it's
like Tel Aviv.
because Israel enacted laws which protected the Muslims in Israel. Jordan enacted a law which denied the Jews citizenship.
I mean, the law can be something, and practice can be something else. I mean, when slavery was deemed illegal in the United States, it took some time to really abolish slavery completely. Legally,
Islam has flourished in Israel. Millions of Muslims pray at the Temple Mount. Like Masjid Al-Aqsa.
I don't know about millions.
No, mate, over 1 million pray there every year.
Every year. I thought you were
in
like
total.
every Friday.
Oh no, not for Jummah,
Like,
not for the
enough
khutbah.
people.
Right. So
yeah.
something to say. Your response to my question is interesting. You say you don't care.
So let me. So international community now is defined, or not defined, is guided by the political and largely economic interests of the nation states that make up the United Nations.
Okay.
And so the United Nations used to be a small selective selection of states. Today, it's a democracy of dictatorships. Today, the United Nations is a democracy of dictatorships. You have groups like nations like Saudi Arabia, which were chairing the Human Rights Commission. You have like Iran sitting on the Council for Women's Rights in the world. Like,
Actually, they're doing
Interesting.
quite well in terms of women's rights. They had a vice president that was
a woman cannot leave the country without permission from her guardian in Iran. Now that might be all right by you, but by my definition, that's a little primitive.
It's not all right. It's not all right.
Yeah, no, it's
But
not.
what
No,
I'm
it's
trying-
being facetious.
what
I'm
I'm-
sorry.
Bro, what I'm trying to say is the information's interesting, but there's kind of a bit of dancing going on because what I'm saying is that clearly the building of these big walled compounds with a load of soldiers and stuff is riling up the locals, so to say. Like how is that conducive to peace?
I'll give you a better example then. So you say that's riling up the locals. I'll give you some quotes from before them soldiers were there. So Haj Amin al-Husseini, before the State of Israel was created, is on record riling up the Muslims, saying, "Oh Muslims, Muslims, I declare a holy war, slaughter the Jews, slaughter them all." I believe it was General Pasha who I think was
You're missing
the
my
leader.
point, bro.
No.
I'm saying, why does it need to continue to expand its territory? That's
It's
what
not
I'm saying.
expanding, its territory's
That's what I'm
expanding.
saying. I have
That's
to
the-
be
Okay.
blunt. Like that's what I'm saying, man. And that seems to me to be in contradiction to saying I want peace for the region. Is it peace on your terms at the battle of a gun? That's my argument.
Okay, perfect. So I didn't understand your
That's-
argument.
that's
and I can
exactly what I'm
respond. Okay, so the biggest thing here to discuss is the West Bank. Is the West Bank Israel or is the West Bank Palestine? And that's ultimately what this conversation is coming down to. Because you're saying Israel's borders are expanding.
Well, I'm saying, is that
yeah.
not what's occurring?
Yeah.
Because
So I'm
right now
trying to
you've got an
respond.
extremely powerful military.
I'm trying to respond to that point. So,
and you know what I mean? Israel's not vulnerable. It's really powerful, man.
Because history is important for this. British
Okay.
mandate of Palestine was given, the British were given mandate over the region on the condition they create a Jewish national home because the Jews were indigenous to that land and had always lived there since time immemorial. Now, what was that land? That land was Jordan. That land was the West Bank. That land was Gaza, and that land was Israel. The first thing the British did 1 year after they got the mandate was they gave 78% of the land to an Arabian family called the Hashemites. So the land was then given over to Jordan, and Jordan was created. So what should have been Israel became, 78% became Jordan. What was left was then supposed to be the Jewish home. So what's left? What's left was Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza.
So can I ask a question?
Right.
You believe personally that it should continue to expand?
So to ask you a question
That's the
direct, I'll
question.
give you a direct answer. I believe, my position is that morally and legally, Israel has a claim to the West Bank. I would give up that claim if it meant we could live in peace with the Palestinians.
Everybody would give up that
Well,
claim
hold
if
on.
it
But
meant
also-
living in peace with the Palestinians. But
If you'd risk the 49% or 51% situation if that were to become Israel
But
proper, right?
So not
thing
with the
is-
West Bank. If you included Gaza, maybe there would be, but not with the West Bank.
Okay.
the thing is, it's only going to create more insecurity for everybody within Israel
Kind of what I'm
and in
saying, yeah.
Palestine
So-
for Israel
Alright,
to
mate.
annex more territory from the West Bank. Because as we can visibly see, right? Every time that there's territory that is annexed, every time that there's a claim by Israel, by Bibi Netanyahu or whoever, that the West Bank is part of Israel, it creates a lot of bad attitudes towards Israel,
So
right?
let me-
And it only fosters insecurity rather than security.
I
Right.
reject that premise because
Tell me
Israel
why.
has given away more land than it's actually got today.
Ah.
Israel took the Sinai Peninsula. It took part of Lebanon. It took a huge part of the. I mean, it took all
Which
the
it
West
was,
Bank.
it wasn't theirs in
It
the
doesn't.
first
It doesn't
place.
matter whether it wasn't theirs or was theirs. I'm not going to say
And
it
they
was
were,
Israel's.
and it wasn't their good intention to do so.
Can you hear me out?
Sure, sorry.
So when nations go to war, in the history of nations, when the Islamic armies marched from Medina to Morocco, they took huge swathes of land. They never give up territory. Whenever wars are fought, usually if the loser, particularly if they instigate the war, loses territory. Because if the loser who instigates the war loses territory, usually they've lost that territory for good. That's how nations' borders are defined.
That's it.
And so with Israel, what Israel said, it says, we're not going to follow this model. We are willing to give away the land that we've defensively acquired in the hope
But it's-
that it will bring... So
but- bro, but-
on the back of... hear me out. On
It's
the
not,
back, then-
it's not only a selfless act, it might be
Yeah, it's
geopolitical
not
manoeuvring.
selfless. So to that
Because you
point-
can't hold on to the Sinai Peninsula. What would be the value of it?
It was rich in oil. There's billions of dollars of oil there.
What I mean is
And
to continue to hold
it's
it
got a
might bring the whole world
it's-
against
No,
it.
no, it's got a natural border. Trust me, it was in Israel to hold these positions would be much more beneficial from a military and an economic
So why did they
position.
give it up?
They get perfect. They gave it up. It's called land for peace, and it's an Israeli philosophy that they will trade land in return for peace. So with Lebanon, they traded land
When
for.
was this
certainly with Jordan,
philosophy
with Jordan, they traded land for peace. With Egypt, they traded land for peace. With Gaza, Fatah, they traded land for peace. And in 2005, they pulled out of Gaza. Hamas then took over the land and launched tens of thousands of rockets into Israel. So it's one instance where land for peace didn't work.
Question.
But with Egypt and Jordan, 100% worked.
When was this philosophy created?
I don't know.
See, that's the issue. Sometimes
I don't know. I don't know what came first, the chicken or the egg.
No,
So I don't.
that's the thing. See, a lot of people will tell you, no, actually there were demands that were made by Britain and the United States in order for them to safeguard their interests in the region, which which told Israel to give
Eve-
back land
Eve-
to.
Been a long time.
Yeah.
Even if that's
it-
true,
to-
even
to
if
give-
that's true, today it is a political philosophy within Israel, which some Israelis support and some Israelis reject.
Which kind of
That you can trade land for
which
peace.
kind of justifies what they
So,
did
I
and
think he
tries
needs to
to
leave.
show off that, well,
I have
hey,
to go.
Israel can do something despite
I hope
big
you know I was
powers.
not comparing
Yeah,
you
no.
to
It's
Nazi, and I
understood.
appreciate
It's understood.
this
It's
chat.
also
Thank
understood
you.
that Will also didn't understand.
I was saying that
Top
groups
class-
justify
Top
themselves.
class guys, both of you.
Thank
See you
you.
later, man.
Likewise.
See you soon.
Likewise.
See you soon.
How much was the population of Jews as well as British Jews?
Of Jews in that region.
How much was the population
Which date?
prior to 1948?
Like, yeah, there's a lot of years prior, like immediately prior.
Yeah.
Around 600,000,
How much the
I
percentage?
think. Is that right? Was it
How much the
600,000?
percentage?
Or is it about 40%? 40%.
40%.
I believe so. And in the Jewish, in the
that
areas that
true,
became,
40%?
I think so. And in the areas that became Jewish, they were the majority population. Let me just pull the exact numbers because I don't like getting numbers wrong
I
on
hate
camera.
4%.
No, it's definitely not 4%. In 1946,
But it's definitely not 40%.
no, I'll give you the exact number.
But listen, you have to let me know.
1946% of Jews
Yeah.
in Israel?
Before 48.
Before 46, okay.
In Israel, they were the majority, but in
Let's say
the
47.
entire
Let's
region,
say 47.
I think they're.
The entire region,
1947.
that- you mean
How
the
much was the population?
Palestinian mandate, the mandate of Palestine.
Yeah, well, it wouldn't be. Yeah, in 46 in Mandate Palestine, yeah. When they handed over the problem to the population, Israel. Just pull this up.
48%.
I'm not saying not 40%, but I thought it was around 40%, but I want to get the number exactly right.
I heard it was
So in,
much lower.
in
I think it's a lot
1947,
lower, yeah.
in 1947, there were 1.2 million Muslims
Okay.
and 630,000 Jews.
Oh, so it's about, what is it, 30%, 34%, yeah? About that, so it is.
100% true.
I mean,
So
that's,
the
that's
majority-
Wikipedia, but yeah.
the majority
I mean, you can do
were
more
Muslim.
extensive.
So
Yeah, the
it's
majority were Muslim, but not
Okay.
not a massive, not a massive majority.
But I mean,
Right, so can I get back to my
That's
question? like,
Yeah, yeah.
we're talking about numbers, but like I said, so I was saying you want Israel to expand and it will be by force.
No, I
because
didn't say that. You've just put words in my mouth.
No, okay, I'm asking you.
Okay.
Is that what you want
No,
to
no.
occur?
So I'll repeat what I said. I believe that Israel has a moral and legal claim to the West Bank, but can trade it. Should give up that claim if it brings peace with the Palestinians. So I would support a Palestinian state if it meant there was lasting peace between the Israelis and Jews.
So, but let's say some people were like, let's say some. What?
I said, I wouldn't.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I misheard. So
Clearly.
let's say that some person was like, we're going to create a compound only for Jews within that area, avoiding the word settlement, right? And it was established, obviously, using military force. You wouldn't be in principle opposed.
So, okay, first and foremost, what are the borders of Palestine? There aren't any. This is the thing.
Because
the
it was
borders
never
bet-
created as a state to
what
begin
you're
with.
talking about as the
Rather
borders,
as a
exactly.
region.
What
Right.
you're talking about the borders are a temporary peace treaty, peace
Yeah.
lines, the 1949 armistice lines between Israel and Jordan.
Okay,
Both
but that's what we're
stipulated-
running on, right?
Yeah, but both stipulated these are not permanent borders. Now, there were Jewish settlements within those areas before those borders.
Right. Okay.
Right.
What I want to, again, another angle is that in its current position, from what I understand it, the Israeli military is very powerful, right? And it won a lot of wars. And also, apparently they have nuclear weapons, which is wise. I mean, I don't blame them for having them. What I mean is that in its current position, with that power and ability to defend itself, should it not be... I don't know what to say, because should it not be satisfied with building its nation where it is at the moment, when it knows that to continue to make that encroachment, whether you think it's justified, okay, making that encroachment will make people against you. That's my point. That's my point.
Right.
And I think this is one of the biggest issues for me with this whole conversation, is for you, peace means an area has to be free of Jews.
Whoa, what are you talking about, man?
That's not necessarily true.
Well, that's what the settlement is. That's what the
But that's an
settlement is.
incredibly
You see-
charged
you
way of
see-
making a statement.
But that
I'm
is
trying
what
to
you're
be...
explicitly stating.
Well, it's on
inexplicitly.
record, and it's
I mean, it's not the
an
word-
absurdity
It's
what
not
you
the
said.
word, when you use the
Absurdity.
term what does settlement mean? Are you talking about Arabs that live in
But
that
you're,
region?
you're missing what I'm saying. I'm
Okay, sorry,
saying
maybe I am.
you've right now. There's this temporary border, like you say, but the border's secure, right?
No.
No. What I'm saying is like, if I want to, can I walk into Israel without there being a barrier?
No.
Right. Okay. So that's what I'm talking about. Like the area that you call Israel these days has an established defensive perimeter, you could say. I'm asking, why is it necessary to continue to expand that perimeter when you know that it will cause violence?
But
When you're-
that's not what causes. This is what we have a different understanding of what is the cause of the violence. For you, the cause of the violence
Well,
is the settlement.
I'm
saying
imagining that would be a
And I'm
cause.
saying before the settlements, the violence was there. The violence predates the settlements. The settlements are not the problem.
Right.
Israel is the problem. The reason Arab armies invaded Israel
to
numerous
stop
times
having a state. Yeah,
wasn't
right.
because of settlement.
But the state is there now.
2 points.
No, but it was there then as well. Every time we've been invaded, the state was there.
Well, I mean, what about when it was British mandate?
Before then, no, there was nothing to invade. It
Right,
was just militias
right.
fighting with each other.
Okay, yeah. So people are fighting with each other, and it's not productive, right? I'm just wary of endorsing an expansion.
But this is what expansion. So
You're going to argue
Can I-
that it's not an
can I-
expansion
can I-
because
can I
you
ask a
own that
question?
land or
No,
something.
the Jews always lived there. They were ethnically cleansed, and your objection
Well,
is to their returning to that land.
All right. Would you be comfortable?
So I would be comfortable. No, I've
Okay.
just said finish.
Yeah, sure,
I
sure,
would be comfortable if there was a Palestinian state, which was created with the condition the Jews weren't ethnically cleansed from their houses. I would be fine with that. But at the moment, that's not what they're saying.
Can
They're
I-
saying we
can-
need to ethnically cleanse the Jews, and that's a problem.
Well, that's in
Palestinian Authority.
I'm in no way
Palestinian
supporting
I don't
that
think
point of
they
view.
explicitly say that.
Article
But that's
6 of
what's
their
on the
national
table.
charter.
That's what's off the table.
to explicitly kill
The
Jews.
not
offer
kill,
that you
ethnically
are
cleansed, it means
talking
remove.
about is not-
Right,
doesn't
remove,
exist, it's
but
not
not
on the table.
necessarily kill.
Nobody's-
Yeah, I never said kill. I said
Right.
ethnically
But
cleansed.
would you be
I
comfortable
agree.
in having
I
like
agree,
a
but it's
Palestinian
not.
state
So,
next to
there
Israel
you
that
go.
claims that this is a state as the national, that can be referred to as the national home of the Palestinians?
With one caveat.
With Jews being allowed to live in there.
Perfect, that's the caveat. Yeah, I'd be
You
fine
would
with
be
that.
okay with that?
If it meant there was peace, yeah. I'd be
What
fine with
about
that.
If they were secure,
the people
if
that
there was
Right.
peace,
this
security,
idea of the
sure.
right to return for the Palestinians that were removed from their homes?
If there was a Palestinian state, I would support the right for them to return there. Yeah, absolutely.
Because
But I
we
mean,
have
maybe
seen
their
numerous
house was
videos
in
of that
Israel.
happening.
They'd
But
have to
that's
come
the,
back
that's
in
the same.
Israel.
So again, 1 million Jews were forced to flee the Muslim world. They have no right to return to the houses they lived in pre-Islam. Like they lived. So Khyber was a Jewish kingdom, a Jewish area before it was conquered by the Muslims, and then it became Muslim. And now Jews have no right to go back. They can't go back to their property. So unfortunately,
Yeah.
one of the realities of conflict is people are displaced. The Jews were displaced and the Palestinians were displaced. The solution was the two-state solution. That's what the international community came up with.
And do you believe that Israel is actually moving toward the current
I
government
think
is moving towards
I think
a
Israel,
two-state
not just the
solution?
government. I think Israelis in general are moving away from a two-state solution, and the Palestinians have never really supported a two-state solution. The community that advocated two-state was Israel.
It's not just Israel, because I know Yitzhak Begin, Yitzhak Rabin, and Yasser Arafat. They were for the two-state solution, but what happened is splinter groups occurred. They killed Yasser Arafat and they killed Rabin, right? Classic thing that happens in deeply divided societies. There's a group that comes out that faces the moderates and tells the population, hey, look at these people, they're being all lenient. So we are going to be the tough ones against the enemy, right? So the issue is not with just the Israelis or just the Palestinians, but there are groups within them. We cannot generalize and say all of them. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm sure that there are some Palestinians, and I've seen it many times. I study in SOAS, so I've seen it many times. Like Palestinians and Jews in Israel, they come together.
Of course, they're humans. Of course.
Of course.
Right, so this brings to a deeper topic.
Are the Jews human?
No, I meant the Muslims.
The deeper talk.
I meant the
And
Muslims.
to be fair, Arabs live in Israel, they live in comfortable.
Yeah.
I'm telling you.
But they have
I've seen
to.
it, they live comfortable.
But to an extent,
But
they have
they
to
live in somewhere
rescind. They have to rescind some of their Palestinian identity.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Although
an
they
issue.
don't.
They just commit
That's a
as well.
huge issue.
And they don't. And that's one of the biggest causes of like in Israel. You've got two contentions. You've got Israeli religious and non-religious Jews clashing, and you have Palestinian Arabs who identify as being Palestinian clashing with wider society, and that is a genuine.
That is a genuine
societal issue.
It's not a surprising issue either.
But the thing
But there's a lot of Arabs that haven't. There's a lot of Arabs that have
I know,
embraced
I've
Israeli
encountered
identity.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah. But here's the thing. What I don't understand is, let's say there would just be a one state. So take over Gaza, take over the West Bank, right? So that means all the Arabs that live there would live under Israel. What would be wrong with that?
Because the Palestinians from the very beginning. Do you know the issue of Kurdistan?
No.
Okay, so the Kurds from the very
vaguely, yeah, I've had a little
okay
bit about it,
from the very beginning of them conceiving or understanding that
The
there's an
grown-ups are
idea of a
talking.
state, right? They wanted a state for themselves because that was the only way that they could ensure or guarantee that that the Kurdish identity was not going to dissipate. As we can see today in Israel, the idea of a Palestinian identity is rescinding, it's dissipating, and even as you rightly mentioned just now.
But
So
are
I
they-
think that by creating a Palestinian state, it provides the proper kind of compartment to make sure that the Palestinian identity remains and grows.
Okay,
Do you get what I mean?
but their identity as Palestinian is more to do with their identity as Muslims, because before
There are Christian Palestinians. Doesn't mean
I
that they're
don't
less
think
Palestinians.
I don't think they're the ones that are complaining, right? Would you
Oh,
know
they
anything about
are.
that?
Oh, they are.
There are Christians. So
They
some
are.
of the biggest terrorists were actually Christians. But
In Israel,
In
Israeli.
Oh, Israeli Christians.
Israeli,
No, not
exactly.
Israeli
That's what I'm
Arabs.
saying. That's what I'm
Israeli
saying.
Arabs.
Israeli Christian
Arabs.
Arabs.
They're very, very well integrated.
there you
They're
go. There's no problem.
They're
I
the
don't know-
highest
it doesn't-
performing religious group in Israel.
Yeah.
They're not massive. In the West Bank, not so much Gaza, they've been cleansed from Gaza. But in the West Bank, Christians are very pro-Palestinian. But in Israel, they're nowhere near to the same.
Right.
They're not
I
really.
guess after
So
you
it's
get
really-
Israeli citizenship,
Yeah, exactly.
your loyalties change a little bit.
Exactly.
To be honest,
But
It
my
happens.
point is the thing is like this: is that the Palestinians, right? Originally they were under the Ottomans, right? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, yes, for a big period of
Long
time,
period of time,
400 years.
Well, before the British took over,
Yeah,
right?
before the
Well, which
British.
is only a half young. Was it 30, 40 years? I don't know. Like it's a short period.
Yeah, very short period of time.
Anyway. And they were actually traitors to the Ottomans, right? And they to support the British,
Yeah.
right? And that's how the First World War. That's how the First World War. So,
to an
but-
extent,
but his-
you
but
could
his-
say
but
that
his-
they
they-
had loyalties towards the British, thinking that the British would help them.
But their identity was not as a Palestinian Arab. They were just Arabs.
Oh
right?
no,
They
that's
didn't
where
have-
I would
they-
disagree with you, because there are scholars from the.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, by the
No,
way.
no, it's
I
okay.
don't like to interrupt.
No, it's
But there have been a lot of scholars, right, who refer to that region in the 1800s, right, who refer to that region as Palestine.
Oh no,
And
no, the
as
region was. I'm not denying
and
that
the
the
people
region
that are
was.
there
Yeah.
as Palestinians.
Presumably they would
But
have
they
an
weren't-
identity.
You know what I mean?
Why would they
No,
not?
no,
No, I'll tell you.
But that's very contentious, is it not?
No,
the
it's
regions.
very-
Why would they not? Like people from
You asked the
Glasgow have an
question, now
identity.
let him answer.
No, but I want to further my point. Like
Even-
people
No,
from
he's
certain
gonna-
regions of Italy have their own identity. So
Yeah,
why would
they're
people
like,
from that
I'm
region
from
not have an
Verona,
identity?
I'm not from Milan.
So
That's a legitimate
So
question.
it's a legitimate
So-
question. Let's see the answer.
the Ottoman Empire was divided into districts, which were tax-paying districts. They were under a different governor effectively, and then they would all send the resources back to the imperial capital, which was the Ottoman Empire. Which where I was going with that, that region is one of the most ethnically, religiously diverse in the world, because it had been conquered and conquered and conquered throughout history. You had religious communities moving there en masse, and so what you tended to have was groups of people within that region rallying around religious identities rather than national identities. So a Jew who was living...
National's different. National,
no,
national identity doesn't need to be national. You can still have a tie to your ancestral
You're
roots.
missing my point is really simple. So throughout the Ottoman Empire, whether a Jew was living in Damascus or a Jew was living in Jerusalem, they would identify as Jewish. There was no Palestinian unifying identity at that point. The region was described predominantly by Europeans as being
You could say
Palestinian.
it wasn't the dominant identity.
Most of the Arabs referred to the region as southern Syria. That was the dominant descriptor of that region.
Yes.
Or then you would have the Sanjak of Beirut, the Sanjak, and they would divide them around the big cities. There would be a region drawn around it. So there was the Mustarafi, I'm not good with Arabic, of Jerusalem. And there would be the Sanjak.
Mustafa?
No, not Mustafa, it's Mustarafi.
Mufti?
No, it's a long word, but it doesn't really matter. There were these regions, but people wouldn't identify as being that. You maybe identify as a city. That's quite common in the Arab world and the Jewish world. So a Jew from Aleppo would be a Halabi Jew. A Jew from Aden would be an Adeni Jew. And so they'd maybe identify with the city, but not a region like Palestine. And what happened was when the Jews came and the Zionists came and started building up the land, the Arabs said that that Palestine was a Zionist word. So if you look at the Palestinian football team 100 years ago, they were all Jews before the state. They were all Jews. If you look at, I drink a wine on Sabbath called Palwin, which is the Palestine Wine Company. All the companies that had the word Palestine in were Jewish institutions. So you had someone like, what's his name? I've forgotten his name. Who came out and said,
I have a question though.
Pardon?
I just want to add one more thing.
I'm following
and
your line.
I just want to add one more thing
Go for
that
it.
supports this. So that's why in 1948 nobody thought, the Arabs didn't think of making a Palestinian state, right? They were thinking of sharing it between the different states. There was never an idea from their perspective of making a Palestinian state.
Yeah.
How come so many Palestinians were expelled then?
What has that got to do with what I just said? Nothing. Let's continue.
Seriously,
Seriously. No, because I don't like your
No,
logic.
because you
No, I don't like your logic. I don't like your logic.
you have to keep
I
into
don't like your
consideration
logic.
when there is a region that
Bring a
is-
logic argument. We'll have a discussion.
when
Go
there
on.
is a region that is labeled as Palestine, right, by the Ottomans, whether or not it's a Jewish word or it's not a Jewish word, but when this region and the people within this region interact with other people outside
They create
that
an
region,
identity, is that what you're
they
saying?
create an identity.
That's what I said.
It's
Yeah,
what
of
it's
course.
what's being
Yeah, that's what I
fostered,
said.
right? Just one second. And
Yeah.
so the people from outside that are not from the Palestinian region, they will refer to people within that place as Palestinians, right?
Well, not necessarily.
And so these people, the people there, the Palestinians, what I believe are the Palestinians, they will understand that this is how they are referred to. So all of the
But they
sudden
weren't.
you-
That's the thing.
But the thing is, they have.
the
Sorry,
most
one
important
second.
point
One
of
second.
this is
So they would have that identity,
Okay.
right? But it would be an inferior one to their religious identity.
You're
Let me-
talking
let me-
about two different things. So there's a Palestinian identity today, and I don't believe that any Zionist has the right to deny the Palestinians the right to an identity. Since the 60s, Palestinians have rallied around this identity, and it has become a national identity for them. But historically, it wasn't an identity.
Yeah, it wasn't.
And that's the two things you're kind of conflating. So
Is
historically,
it significant?
it's only significant in the sense of when we're
I would disagree,
arguing
I would
that
disagree.
actually there was no Palestinian people.
Who was
and peop-
expelled in 1948? Arabs or Palestinians?
So no one was expelled. In very few cases there were expulsions.
They
The majority
ran
of
away.
people fled. The majority of people
And
fled.
they
So
fled
the language
because
is
of the
very
Arab-
important.
The
So
Arab, because of the Arab
Arabs or
countries, they
Palestinians?
told them to flee.
Because that's what it really comes down
Arabs fled.
Really. Of what?
It seems like you're not willing to go with the flow of the discussion. You want to kind of jump in and
So
have
it
your own
depends.
stuff. But
So
anyway.
Speaker's corner.
if you look,
No,
so
I'm
it's
speaker's
exactly
corner. I'm also not part of it. I'm
Haj
saying that it's not a good
Hajamin
way to have a
al-Husseini, who
discussion.
was a Palestinian nationalist who existed before the 60s. So he's an example that there was a Palestinian national movement.
Well, I think he's going on the same
Hajamin al-Husseini, his surname is Hussein. What does Hussein mean? It means he descends from the Prophet. So if he descends from the Prophet, where is he from?
I don't
Arabia.
know if Hussein means descendant of
Usually-
the
Many-
Prophet, but,
okay, also, if you look in-
maybe you
if you
can
look-
check me.
I just
no,
want
no,
to.
no, no. But maybe
I thought
maybe
that's
he
what-
was a Sayyid, like
I
he
thought
was
Husseini
part of.
was-
But
let me
not
Google
Al
that.
Husseini means that he's a descendant of the Prophet.
I want to bring two important points that
really do much
to
with the name.
discuss about the
I'm not
identity of the
100% sure
Palestinians.
on that. Though.
One is
Just, you know.
one is that if you look at the definition of what a refugee is, or a Palestinian refugee that left, was kicked out by 1948, as he claims, or we claim that they ran away and they were told to run away by the Arab nations, is that the definition is if they were there for 2 years, right, in mandatory Palestine, let's say from 1946 to 1948, right, then they would be considered Palestinians, right? That is what constitutes a Palestinian refugee. So, for example, if so,
According to
The United Nations.
what United Nations?
This is a 2-year thing.
You
I missed the
adopt it.
beginning. I was reading.
Yeah.
You
the,
adopt
the,
this.
the United Nations.
No, I don't-
and the
I don't-
No, you
I'm-
don't adopt this. Okay.
I don't adopt it or not adopt it. I'm just explaining you
This is
what is
what a
considered
Palestinian.
what is considered Palestinian.
according to the
Right.
United Nations,
So-
which
Right. So
Dubious.
my
That's
point
That's where
is,
we get the
my-
definition.
and
today,
also
that's
if you
when
look
it
at
was a
the
refugee.
yeah, unfortunately,
If you look
because,
at-
like it's the
and the
most,
other-
it's the institution with the most legitimacy. I mean, as you said, it's a democracy of
but it's not necessarily. But the idea that they've been living there as an ancestral
It's a
land.
democracy of nation states,
It's not-
dictatorships.
But the-
Okay.
60% of them are dictators.
That doesn't make them
Two
the democracy of
dictatorships sit on the
dictatorships.
Security Council, so I wouldn't go that far.
No,
But anyway,
I don't know
let
if
me
you
just
could
make
call
this
them-
point. The idea that they lived in an ancestral land for thousands of years is not credible. Yes, there are small amounts of people that were, but the idea that Palestinians and by and large were, it's not credible.
If you're gonna
And that's
really
one more point.
emphasise
Just
that-
one more point, right? If you look
By
at
and
the,
large, we're what?
that's not their ancestral land. By and large, the Palestinians, it's not their ancestral
It's not their ancestral land.
That's correct, yeah.
Even though like if there's a Palestinian who you met right in 1970 and he told you, I have lived here for the past 30 years. My grandfather lives across the street from me.
Right. So I'm not saying there were some, but my point
course
is
there were.
there were
many
the
of those
fact that
people.
of course there are many, but when you take the whole number, the percentages are not that high, right?
The percentages are very high.
I'll
So
tell you how
that's-
I know they're not. I'll tell you how I know they're
How
not.
many
So if you look at the
fled in
numbers,
48?
if you look at the numbers of the growth of the Palestinians, the Muslim Palestinians, right? It shot up tremendously between 1890,
82.
82. Is that the date?
1882 and 1946. Village
Well, there you go.
surveys
He's got the
is-
exact
Shot up
date. He's got the
tremendously.
exact date. Yeah. So
Why?
that because they all came there. They all
No,
came
they
there.
didn't come there,
They-
because, but
They
like,
did.
They did.
They were
They
attracted
did.
by
This
the
is historical
economic
fact.
prosperity.
Exactly.
Just to really
Historical
hammer
fact.
home
way
this
the
point,
Israelis came
who are the
before,
two
yeah.
You could
biggest
say-
who are the two biggest Palestinian leaders people can think of? Probably
Yasser
Izzadin
Arafat, and there
al-Qassam,
was-
who the Qassam rocket's named after, and Yasser Arafat. Izzadin al-Qassam wasn't from Palestine. Yasser Arafat wasn't from Palestine. One was from Syria, one was from Lebanon. Syria or Lebanon was Izzadin al-Qassam.
He wasn't
and
from
Cairo.
Yasser Arafat
Yasser
was not
Arafat
from
was Cairo, born in Cairo.
Let me
Right.
just
okay, he can be
let
born
me
in
make
Cairo,
a
but he
point
can be
here.
Palestinian.
How?
I just want-
How? He was
Because
born
when
before the
his
creation of the
parents,
state.
okay, but when his parents come from that region, it can be understood. Do you get what I
But
mean?
that's our argument. Our argument is our grandparents came from that
Yeah,
region, and you
exactly.
say that doesn't work.
The thing
Yeah,
is, no,
exactly.
no, I didn't say it doesn't
Exactly.
work. I didn't say it doesn't work. I never said anything
Okay.
like that.
Okay,
But I
so-
said it works. But the same logic can be applied for the Palestinians.
I would argue that many of the
They-
Palestinians
right?
actually do descend from Jews.
You would say that they
No,
descend
no,
from Jews, but there
it's
are
not a
lots of-
problem. It's not a problem.
there's-
Israel
there are lots
accepts.
of
If you go-
Palestinians
Israel
that say
accepts
something-
Palestinians
If you
to
go
live
to
there. It's not a
the
problem.
grave of
There's no problem.
Samuel, which is just outside of Jerusalem,
Okay.
you'll see old Palestinian houses which have Magen David, Star of David's carved above them. Why? Because these families used to be Jewish. Many of them have traditions of lighting candles in certain ways, similar to like a yahrzeit candle at the grave. And so some Palestinian families clearly have Jewish traditions and clearly have Jewish ancestors.
I would not.
Some Muslims
deny
have
that
Jewish
some do.
ancestry.
No, I heard someone shout.
Yeah,
There are
yeah,
lots,
Shared region of
Yeah, quite possibly.
and there are a lot of Palestinians that do have Islamic traditions, and they are Muslim.
Yeah.
Not necessarily
They came
all
over
of them
when
are
they
just-
conquered the
and,
land.
And when you use the example for not necessarily just because they conquered the land, but because they lived there as well.
Yeah,
You get
after
what I
they
mean?
conquered it.
Well, I mean, when did they conquer it?
Right, well,
1500.
can we? Let's say I want
500
to.
years ago.
I want to
But-
jump
but-
in here.
but at the same-
Okay.
but-
See if I can say
but maybe
something
we can-
interesting.
How are
maybe we
they?
get-
How are they to blame?
Do you think we should
Right,
get Medina
for
back?
what happened 500 years
They're,
ago?
they're not.
They're
in
not
the,
to
in the
blame.
same way that the
So we
Israelis
cannot-
are to
we
blame for
cannot-
what happened 71 years ago.
Okay, 71, but like
It's
right,
just a matter of time.
right. But there is an issue that they are almost
So let's
being
see.
punished for something that they were not responsible for.
It looks like
They're not being punished.
I want to question that. I want to question. I'm gonna try and speak. So I'm gonna question the. How do you say
There's
it?
more Range Rovers in the West Bank than in Gaza, you mean?
that example.
Gaza.
How do you? I mean,
group
this
of
type of
people have
conversation
easily-
here with this competing narratives.
Yeah.
It's to me, it doesn't seem entirely productive, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
And that's being very euphemistic. So that comes back to my other point saying about the expansion, why increasing tension, because we're going to argue about the history of it endlessly, and no side's going to win on that. No side's going to win in it. They're going to support. Not saying you guys, but they're going to support that. You're going to support that. It's always going to be like that. Nobody's going to be supreme.
I'll give you the reality. In this,
That is the reality.
No, the reality of the Israeli position. This is literally. I've sat down with some of the most senior generals in the Israeli army, and this is what they literally. It's the same thing. We cannot afford to make one mistake. National security is everything. Is everything for us, because if we make one mistake, we will be driven into the sea. We will be slaughtered. We will be massacred. So unlike Western nations that have the luxury of sitting on their laurels and espousing all these theoretical, hypothetical
Are you
values.
saying that's me?
No, I'm just talking about not you. Literally everyone who has an opinion, including myself, in the West, we all know what's best for these, like true colonialists, we all know what's best for this region in the world. Like you're saying, well, they've got to stop expanding the borders.
No, I'm trying to be quite fair here, man. I'm trying to be quite fair. I'm saying that I'm aware that some people want to annihilate Israel, and I'm not supporting that.
So what I'm trying to say is, our opinions literally do not come. Like for me, it's a disaster because I do PR for Israel. Is basically what I do. I promote Israel to very hostile audiences, and they don't make my job easy when they say we take a zero tolerance stance on threats, existential threats to us. And
That's
so,
fine.
And so what
You're missing what I'm saying. I'm saying that they're going to make claims of their history being the truest. You're going to make claims of your having the divine right to that land. Or whatever.
No.
Okay,
No.
whatever. Say whatever you want.
Get the
The reality is as it is. You've got warring factions.
Yep.
The warring factions have competing interests.
Yep.
Although
Right?
it does say in the Quran that belongs to the Israelites.
Okay. Now,
If
from
only
my
they don't make
perspective,
mistakes and they
if
go
you-
against
if
God's
you
word, which
genuinely
they do
want
all the time.
the area to be peaceful,
They do all the time.
That's
It's
hilarious.
potentially
How many
possible
kids die?
to
How many
achieve.
kids die each year?
It
in
requires
Gaza?
You can
maybe
take somebody else's
concessions
land.
on both.
It doesn't belong to you.
Fucking hell, guys.
According to
Concessions on
Islam-
both sides.
according to
Are
Quran,
you aware of the
Islam,
concessions
in
Israel's
Islam,
made on
it's
numerous
a-
occasions?
You can't kill a kid. Every year there are
Sorry,
kids
mate.
that are
Are
dying
you
in
aware
Gaza.
of the
That's
concessions that
not
Israel's
clearly-
made for
No,
that?
no.
Well, I
those
mean,
are
could I
Israeli
also counter
airstrikes
that
as
with,
well.
are you aware of the number of
Israeli
civilians
airstrikes
that have been killed?
Let's put them into
Lopsided.
You understand?
Yeah, and I would say far fewer than any of the surrounding nations. Yet nobody talks about that.
Yeah, but that's a what about.
But
There may be a
Do you
what
know
about,
what
but it's
double
really
tap
important
is?
in this
I
conversation.
don't think this is going to pick up much of this.
So what I'm trying to, guys, if you're having a separate conversation, go over there because we're trying to do it on the mic.
Go away.
Lost my chain of thought now. So Israel's primary concern isn't what the international community thinks. It's the security of its people. Now, factored into that is huge concessions they've made for peace. So they offered the Palestinians 97% of the land they wanted, including East Jerusalem. They offered the right to return for some, and for those that didn't, they offered $30 billion in aid. It was rejected by Arafat. Clinton said it was, and the Saudis said as well, that it was completely the Palestinians that rejected the Camp David Toba offerings. There's been numerous instances where Israel has made huge gestures, from giving up Gaza, from giving up the Sinai, from giving up land held from Jordan. Israel makes from helping establish the Palestinian Authority and dividing the West Bank into separate areas which are shared autonomy and complete autonomy by the Palestinian Authority. So Israel has continuously made concessions.
You're doing the PR
Not
job very
necessarily.
well.
Yeah, you are.
But
That's-
I'm aware that there's two sides. So
And so what's
Yeah,
the
that's
Palestinian
the
side? So
no, what I mean is, obviously you've admitted your own agenda, and that's
Yeah.
needs to be known.
But
which
of
makes
course-
it difficult. But
And where is it
I
that
know,
says
I know,
Zionist? I'm
I know,
clearly going to have a
mate.
bias.
I know, but I want to actually, I don't know you personally, but I want to actually connect with you,
Yeah.
which you might not be able to do because of maybe you have ties that you might not be able to say.
No, I can say anything.
Yeah,
I've got no funding.
What I
nothing,
mean
so
is,
can
like,
say
if
anything.
I talk to a Dawa guy and I'm trying to convince him that Islam is false, that's a ridiculous thing for me to do because he can never admit it, even if I make the best point in the
So
world.
th-
I'm trying to say, possibly you're in the same position.
So this gentleman will testify there are things I will speak out against as well. So as an example, I don't think the blockade on Gaza is a good move for both the Palestinians or the Israelis.
Okay, but
So
you're
there are
very.
areas like-
But when I make a, when
number
I
of
ask you the question about should Israel become larger, you always evade the question.
No, so I've not evaded. I've given you my
He said
absolute, honest, like
Can
heartfelt.
you can just say yes, man?
He
No,
said,
no,
he
no,
said yes
Mike,
if it's good for security.
Right.
I believe Israel has a right to that land. I believe it's Israeli
legal
land,
and
but I give it
moralistic
up if it means we have peace. That's my position. I can't change my position to be something else to give a more acceptable soundbite for the camera or for you. That is my position.
But I'm trying to go from it maybe on a rationalist viewpoint of that.
But you think the land is Palestinian
No,
land?
I
think
don't-
it's Israeli. That's why
I don't think either.
He's just trying to
I don't
look
think
towards the
either.
future. He's
I don't
not
think
making
either,
any
man.
claims.
Because
Okay.
I'm not
Okay.
supporting the
Okay.
like the Intifada. I'm not supporting
Yeah.
the Zionists, right? I'm just saying, it's like it would seem to me more reasonable, especially like I understand the threats to the nation of Israel. Like I understand it. I'm not denying that. You know what I mean? And you're going to defend yourself. You have the weapons. You have the power. You have and other people are threatening you and saying you should be wiped out. I'm aware of that. What I'm trying to say is that the expansion doesn't help, even if you personally believe that it's justified.
So let's
That's it.
take the expansion.
Do you
Let's
agree-
take the Golan Heights.
Just one leave the Golan Heights.
You're going to
aside
say
for just a moment.
it's necessary for the
do you
defense of the
believe-
country. It may be.
They call the 1940. Do you know what Israelis call the 1949 armistice line, the Green Line? They call it the Auschwitz lines because they believe it leaves them vulnerable.
Okay. Do you believe that Palestinians have legitimate grievances?
Some Palestinians, yes, yeah, I do.
Okay, some Palestinians. Do you believe that some of these grievances are a derivative of Israeli military attacks on Gaza? Okay, you
No,
could say.
no.
Okay, look. You could say, like every single war, Israel is not in this bubble. It's not in this vacuum, right? States conduct airstrikes on buildings to kill one target or 12 targets, even though there might be 10, 15, 20 innocents.
So I think Israel
right?
does more than any other nation in the world to
Okay,
minimize
but
that.
at the same time, airstrikes, it has that effect. Kids have died, women have died. So this contributes
Yeah.
to the grievances. This contributes then in return to the insecurity that Israel feels.
But
So Israel is really perpetuating its own problem
this,
here.
and this is the long and short of this. War is horrible. People die. It's tragic, like in any conflict. But you have to look at the numbers. Israel has the military might to flatten Gaza, like literally destroy every soul
Right?
that's
And
alive.
more people died in Gaza than Israel
Can I just finish my point?
from attacks.
Israel has the military might to do so. Instead, what it does, it goes to huge lengths to minimize civilian casualties.
Because it's scared of international.
No, because it doesn't want
No,
to kill
you know
civilians.
it. Israel is scared shitless
No,
of international
Israel doesn't give
recognition.
Israel
Tries its hardest in its PR.
How many United Nation
You know it.
how many United Nation resolutions
do a lot
does it?
to
How many
influence human
United
rights groups
Nations
to not
resolu-
release statistics
How many
and all that.
United
But
Nations?
you know that's true.
How many United Nations resolutions does Israel honour?
I don't know.
Very few.
Very
Because
few.
Israel doesn't care about international.
There are
consent.
20 resolutions against
And why
Israel
does it
as
not?
well.
Because of the
Because
history you say?
the existential threat. Israel's only concern is survival, so it doesn't care about
Carries out
international
huge
opinion.
PR.
Okay,
And
I
so-
got you there. I got you there.
reason for that.
Let's keep it on that one. Its only concern is survival.
Yeah.
Therefore, there will be a set of actions that are more likely to lead to that higher chance of survival.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe one of them could be not expanding.
And so there are
don't you feel
Israelis.
like-
There are Israelis that hold that same position. There is a huge peace movement. I mean, most Israelis want
No,
peace,
not enough.
but there's a very okay.
get-
How
they get
large is
Netanyahu
Come on, man.
again.
Let him finish what he's saying.
There's a huge. So, for instance, whenever anyone talks about statistics of how many Palestinians have died, they primarily come from an organization, an Israeli Jewish organization called B'Tselem. Like, there's a huge movement within Israel of like hardcore peaceniks. There has been from its inception.
We've
Um,
seen the
yeah.
protests.
Yep.
And so, those that want to expand the border are predominantly driven, with the exception of those that are religiously motivated, on the issue of security. Those that want peace are also driven by the issue of security. And everybody has compassion. I believe most Israelis, most Palestinians are good people. I've met enough of them to realise that most people are good. They see the solution for peace as different. And the Israeli right, let's call them, they see security.
Let me interrupt you. Israel is much more powerful than the surrounding nations are right now, right? Especially with nuclear capacity,
economically,
right?
yeah.
If you consider each of them in separate, yeah.
No, together. They killed. They got attacked on 3 angles and they won the wars, man. They did it before.
So let's
but
take-
the reason why I'm saying that is because you're in that position and you're also economically strong, right? I think. Is it not? You shouldn't have to, but maybe you can take the higher ground, so to speak, because of your power and strength now that you've established now by fighting and such. Maybe you're in a position to actually make concessions.
But we do that. I believe we do that.
Okay.
And that's literally, as an example, electricity, water, all the utilities that the Palestinians in Gaza use, yeah, almost entirely comes from Israel.
Right, but they have cut them off.
And do you know why they're cut off?
Because you believe that Hamas are operating there?
No, they're cut off. The relationship is that Israel has a deal with the Palestinian Authority, which is centered in the West Bank.
Uh-huh.
The Palestinian Authority pays a reduced rate bill to Israel for the utilities. When the Palestinian Authority have beef with Hamas in Gaza, they don't pay the bill. And if you speak to Gazans, the people that they hate the most in the world, more than the Jews, is Hamas, Fatah. They hate the Palestinian Authority.
There are a lot of people who don't like Fatah.
Right.
Yeah,
okay.
for sure.
I understand that. Well, there's a divide, a divide and conquer
all I'm
the
saying is
aspect there.
there's tens of thousands of rockets have been fired by the Palestinians in Gaza
Yeah.
into Israel. In spite of this, Israel provides it with utilities. Hamas frequently send their family to get treatment in Israeli hospitals. Like, there isn't a senior Hamas family, basically, that hasn't been treated in Israeli hospitals.
I'm not 100%
Are you
sure
serious?
about
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Are they all? I mean, I'm not. I'm
I-
questioning it legitimately because that seems a bit strange. Would you not just arrest them?
So, no, because Israel believes in the principle of providing medical attention. Israel set up medical hospitals in Syria. It frequently treats Palestinians. It treats
I don't
from
know
the
to
West
what
Bank and from
extent
Gaza.
that is
Wait, do
true,
they arrest them
because-
after they treat them?
Because
This
even-
is
they
the
just let
family.
them go?
The
Well,
family members.
I would say that would be more intelligent.
But this isn't the generals. This is the family members of the
Okay,
generals.
right.
And-
I
yeah.
see. Okay, I
Because
misunderstood.
at the
Okay,
same
sorry.
time, you need to understand that this is not necessarily because there's this selfless intent, but also because you want to have some leverage over the people that you treat. So whenever the government says, well, when it comes to Hamas officials or the people that are high up, they tell them, hey, don't you remember the day that I treated your kid?
I don't think that really works with Hamas.
I mean,
I think Hamas is just a huge bunch of hypocrites. They live in absolute affluence in Qatar and various places, fly around the world on huge, private jets, have billions of dollars which they keep in their bank accounts while their people are starving. I think they have no.
I heard some stories about this.
Conflict with sending their family to get treatment in Israel because they care about themselves. They don't care about the Palestinians.
Israel,
in my opinion.
I've heard some stories about this, about how they go to some places to gamble, and the issue with Palestine is not just because of Israel, but also because the leadership themselves do not take the necessary strides, and they're divided. Let's be honest with you. There's the PA, Islamic Jihad, Hamas, and a couple of other groups. Khalas, the place is small. You're already divided. Doesn't help. But we have to
fractured place.
very fractured, but there's also a significant problem that a lot of the power, a lot of the leverage is in Israeli hands. They provide the water, they provide the electricity. There's even a sort of I don't know if it's a buffer zone or a border next to the ocean.
Right. So
where
something
they
to
can't-
say
where,
to work on. I want to work
three-
on your point. I want to work on it.
Yeah, just 1 second though. Palestinians cannot extend more than 3 miles away from the beach line from the coast to fish.
Yeah.
So they do really put forward a lot.
So
of
what I
effort
want to
there.
say, what I
Go
want
for
to
your
work on this
yeah.
point there is that certain provision of utilities might also be due to the location of aquifers, for example. and where rains will fall due to geography, and one side controls that, and they give it to them. Okay, if you wouldn't, they would all be wiped out in a very short amount of time, which would get incredible condemnation, right? Yeah. So let's put that there. But here's an idea. I would say that I'm just trying to imagine the mindset of being somebody living in Gaza, right? I think you're going to get a natural resentment. For example, if Israel provides things to the Palestinians in some sort, electricity, water supply, medical treatment, but they're opposed. So that's going to make, you understand, you'll have that sense of resentment against them for using something that they offer to you, even though you're your enemy. So here's an idea, maybe that would be self-contradictory, the idea I'm about to suggest, but would having the ability to produce those things themselves not give them a greater sense of ownership and nationalism that might lead them away from being in eternal conflict?
Perfect. And I think for me, that's the key point. I think had the Palestinians had a different set of leaders throughout history, the world would have been very different. So as an example, and I'll give a few examples, in 48, had the Palestinians, instead of declaring they were going to drive the Jews into the sea, declared independence and two states were created. One Palestine would be huge, like much bigger than any future Palestinian state will be, but we'd have peace today. But more important than that, Israel's been around for 71 years. In that time, they've resurrected a language, they've built up one of the most innovative nations in the world, they've managed to take a refugee people from around the world, integrate them fully, like people who are living different cultures, European Jews, African Jews, Iraqi Jews, they've moved them all into one state, and they built up this phenomenal state which enriches the world.
It's good PR. We know this.
No,
we know
so
this.
Let me get to my point.
Okay.
Which enriches the world tenfold. Had the Palestinians done the same? So the Palestinians have received billions and billions and billions of dollars in aid over the years.
Sound like Trump.
And what have they done with that? They've invested it in an infrastructure to attack Israel. Most of the aid that flows into Gaza flows into the coffers of Hamas. They use it to build tunnels, rockets.
But can you understand their perspective? Have you imagined their perspective?
Yeah,
Do
many
they
times.
not?
Well, then you would be. Your imagining wouldn't be making this argument.
So again,
There's
here's-
that
Would you not do the same?
So here's the example, yeah, and it's not just the it's the entire Arab world and their situation and their view of this conflict. So when a Palestinian Arab settles in Lebanon, yeah, and there's how many Palestinians are in Lebanon? Do you know? Is it like a million or is it
I
a
don't
high
know,
number?
but I think it's 800,000.
Yeah, it's a high number of Palestinians. They're denied the right to own property. They're not allowed to go to the Lebanese school. They're denied Lebanese citizenship, despite living there like third or fourth generation. The Arab world has kept them as perpetual refugees. It's in the interests of Palestinian nationalists to keep the Palestinian people downtrodden and oppressed, because then the conflict lives. The minute the Palestinians get comfortable, we call them Palestinian refugees. How the hell are they refugees if they've been living for 71 years or longer in another country?
You could look. I didn't. I was
Like even within the West Bank, there are cities which they call refugee camps.
You have to keep into consideration that when it comes to the issue of Lebanon, who wants a Lebanese citizenship? It's not like the Lebanese government or the state are
It's not
providing
just
anything.
Lebanon though. It's even
But you know, in Kuwait, they provide citizenship to Palestinians.
No.
Look, the only out of the 4 Kuwaitis that I have met in my universities, two of them were Palestinian. So they ascribe as being Palestinian, right? It's not like all of the states have one uniform way in which they deal with the Palestinians and the Palestinian issue. But if we want to work towards a solution, you can agree that there are some Palestinians, if not a lot of Palestinians, that believe that they are besieged by Israel. How do you dismantle that attitude?
That's what I was saying.
Okay,
That's
guys,
what, and I was
say
saying
that
about
again because everyone's started saying and I was looking up Kuwait, so let me fade it.
maybe our phone's not good.
Yeah, I
Just to
agree,
interrupt
I
just
agree.
for a second.
So-
you know, I've been listening to a long part of the conversation. There've been some good points said. This was a long conversation, but you just said something that's the most important thing.
How do you dismantle the attitude?
How do you solve the situation? What would you do in this situation? Would you
That's what we
keep
keep
the
saying.
status quo? Would you change something in the Palestinians, change something in the Israelis?
I've got an
what
idea.
exactly is the actual
Bring it over.
change
I'll play
you would
it over.
implement? You know, because you'll just keep going in circles if you don't talk specifically about that.
But that's
thing.
what we've been doing, man.
I-
If you were listening,
I know,
we
I know.
actually
Look,
were.
So I'll
know,
put
but,
my thing. I am solution agnostic. Genuinely, my concern
Solution agnostic.
agnostic.
What does
Any
that mean?
solution that brings about peace I'm gonna
Okay, what do you
subscribe
believe
whether it's a one. So I don't. I will support a two-state solution. I will support a one-state solution. I
Okay.
will support a federation. I will support. There's so many different proposals on the table.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
it depends on the sentiment of the nations in that moment as to what's going to bring about peace.
So what do you think about this? What do you think about this idea? Similar to what I was saying that maybe it's possible that a lot of the resentment and will to continue fighting is due to the identity of being, like you said, refugees and under attack, oppressed, which might be legitimate. So working to eliminate that maybe would take away the problem, would take away the origin, not the origin, because there's still going to be a historical antagonism for a long time. But what I mean is, like, if the people there have more self-determination, like let's say they generate their own power, or be able to pipe their own water, be able to fish their own land without interference, and I know you're going to say that will work against the protection of Israel. Well, okay, sorry to try and put words in your mouth, although I believe that would actually happen. Maybe that is a step in the right direction towards giving an area that's got nothing get back into its hands.
So I think we're painting a. So
you know what I'm saying?
It's an important
so I
point.
think it's really, we can actually look at the reality on the ground to assess if that works. So if we go to Gaza, the situation you've described is the reality. Like, they don't have utilities, they don't have infrastructure, there is poverty.
Right.
It's not a great solution. The situation. You go to the West Bank, you visit Rawabi, you visit Ramallah. These are modern cities with huge infrastructure, with economies and billions of dollars flowing into those cities, and the Palestinians living there live a great life. You've got incredible villas, you've got like a strong middle class, like a very strong middle class, and it spans Christian and Muslim. Bethlehem is a predominantly Christian
One
city.
of the cities
Or
that
was
I've
it?
heard
Was
of.
it? Well, it is not anymore predominantly
How
Christian.
about you guys give
Some-
your solutions?
Okay.
My solutions.
He gave his.
Quickly, do I have time to write a whole book? No, but seriously, it's a huge issue. But
Usually the
first of all,
simplest is the best.
First of all, I would agree with you. Give them that self-determination. Give them that
Why don't
that
they have
access, that access to resources. I mean, you saw
let
the
me-
land that
let
they
me
have.
just
Like in the West Bank, there's a wall, like the wall that Trump wants to build. He took that idea from there. And
Well, what's wrong with that?
what's wrong with that is that
It's a
it
border.
reduces mobility.
No,
it
but it's a
reduces
border fence.
people's access.
I just
But
can't go to France.
The borders do intrude into the actual borders that were proclaimed to be for the West Bank. Let's
But
admit
that's
it.
what we agreed. There were no borders. It was a temporary peace line.
Right, but at the same time, peace line. Okay, but who began then to proclaim what the borders were?
So
Israel. It was
Palestinians
not
have
the
never.
Palestinians.
Palestinians won't recognise
Did the
Israel.
Palestinians agree to that wall being built in those specific areas? No. And I think that the problem is that these walls will block access to much needed resources.
If it's
It will
blocking
block
access, it means they're in
mobility,
Israel.
right? But
If it's
where
blocking
are they
access-
going to get electricity and water from?
They build it. So Israel, 97% of Israel's water is recycled. Yeah,
90.
97% of Israel's water is recycled. The Palestinians
necessary
could
for
build
the
it.
area.
Yeah, the Palestinians can
70%
build
of
up
them
similar
are
infrastructure. The Palestinians can build power plants. The thing that stops the Palestinians from doing these things, isn't Israel.
Well,
Okay,
I know
so-
where
so-
you're getting at.
So what you're saying is, like, just let me give my solution because I have to go because I have to
Alright, okay.
find some place to break my fast.
It's always the reason.
So I feel okay. We have to create a place for them to generate their own water,
Yeah.
their own electricity. Give them some sense of that, like they have power over their own life, and that their life is not dependent on something else.
Right.
A second point, which maybe you will not agree with,
Yeah.
is stop the airstrikes and killing of symbolic protesters.
Okay, so you
Okay.
definitely disagree with that because that's not what happens.
What about you,
But this
Bill?
is Rawabi, yeah.
I've seen that place. I've seen that
Rawabi
place.
is like a stunning
Yeah, it's like-
modern city, yeah.
that's one of the
This is the reality in Palestine.
That's West Bank, yeah?
Yeah, this is
That-
in the
that's-
West Bank.
Okay, but that's one city. But like, okay.
No, but we can go to Ramallah. It will look as
Okay,
beautiful.
and the point you're trying to make is
Yeah.
the Palestinians have had this opportunity to do that and they haven't done that. Right. Oh, fine. I mean, I could create rationales that would say the reason why they've devoted their resources to attacking instead of building. I could make a rationale for that I would think most people would say, oh, seems reasonable. It doesn't mean it's right, because obviously it's not. But the situation we've got now is the situation we've got. You can say, well, they had the chance to fuck them, but
My point is, what can
it's not gonna
Israel do
help.
if the Palestinians receive billions of dollars in aid, in international funding, and they choose to build tunnels to attack Israel with?
Don't say they. There
Okay,
are
the
specific ones that
Hamas
are
and
in power.
Fatah, If they choose, so Fatah, how it typically works, Fatah puts the money in its pocket,
Yeah.
Hamas puts the money in its pocket
Yeah.
and into arms.
Yep.
And rather, it's not, for me, it's not Israel's responsibility to build power plants for the Palestinians, the people they're basically at war with.
How does that money flow
that's
to those people?
that's my point.
How exactly does it flow to them?
International aid, so...
No, but how do they get
so-
a hand on it?
so
International aid doesn't
Qatar-
say, okay, let's help Hamas, let's help these guys, and
that's
directly
the-
gives them the
yeah.
money. How do they get a hold
So
of it?
it depends. So Qatar will literally take cases full of money into Gaza, like literally briefcases filled with millions of dollars, and give it to Hamas. And if for some reason Israel lets Qatar do that.
Right.
And whereas the European Union,
Interesting reason why.
Is that perpetuating the conflict?
I
Give them more
imagine,
reasons to intrude
I
into
imagine it's
Palestine?
humanitarian. So Israel goes to great lengths to calculate or to ensure that there isn't a humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, which is
So-
one of the reasons I don't agree with the blockade, because
Right. So-
no, I'm speaking ill about Israel. I'm saying like
Okay.
that's,
So what I'm saying
But they're
also,
allowing money to come in for humanitarian aid.
so what?
yeah.
Okay, so what I want to say is that
Hamas are the effective government.
like
how else?
we're dealing with a really suboptimal situation. We have to obviously acknowledge that we're dealing with a situation that's not good, but we have to work with what we have. Joseph.
Yeah.
So
Sorry,
what
I
I'm
was just
what
saying.
I'm trying to say to you is that we're in conjunction with the ideas that I previously said. You could say due to the power disparity, in terms of the ability to project force, right? This is going to be a confrontation. You're not going to like this idea, but it's an extreme situation. Maybe it's an extreme solution, right? It's possible that I don't mean moving out, but I mean pulling back the force exerted on the area, trying to give them more self-control, and they're going to attack you, and maybe not responding. You know what I mean?
No, that doesn't work for
No,
me.
I know, but what I mean is that because the power disparity is indisputable, like you already said, you could wipe out the area 100 times over, right? And I'm saying that those people are going to have this will to fight constantly because they don't control anything. How can you get a job? How can you feed your family? Our water is given by the Israelis that conquered us. We hate them. How are they ever going to lose that mindset? Never, unless there's some sort of distancing.
What's your solution?
I'm
So
saying
that's
it.
it. His solution.
You understand
is,
me?
Yeah.
And obviously, no,
You're
you don't.
making
You don't want your
questions.
people. You don't. He sees it. You don't. Whatever, man.
No, listen, Will, come on.
Well, I'm going to engage with you. So
Sure.
you see, you're not going to obviously like the idea of enduring attacks, right?
Yeah.
Because your people are going to get killed, injured, and be scared or whatever, right?
Yeah.
That's not good. I know it's not good. What I'm saying is because you could wipe them out and your attacks are very effective and a lot of the people there die, and that's not good either, right? So what I'm saying is that if you can pull back that, have more self-determination, and let them redirect their energy.
Yeah.
That's all I
So-
could say.
And-
Your solution has some merit, to be honest. Yeah.
I'm not saying it's even implementable, but that's the only thing I could see.
So the way I see the you get a handshake for that one. The way I see it is when I speak to Westerners,
You're going to characterize me by where I was born?
as in people who aren't from Israel and the West
Okay,
Gaza.
okay.
Yeah.
That's racist.
And I know I'm a massive racist. Oh no! Zionism is racist.
Did you just assume it's race?
How dare you?
That's assumed you're
dare
right. That's
you.
excellent.
I identify as a Apache.
Completely
Not the helicopter.
You're like
the-
that woman from the
not the
so
helicopter.
Trump calls Pocahontas. That's her
yeah.
name.
You
Yeah,
guys,
so I got
Memes aside.
before you continue,
You get Ramadan
lovely comment.
Kareem.
Thank you,
Just
Ramadan
break your
Mubarak.
fast.
Thank you.
See you later, man.
See you.
Have some dates for me.
We'll do.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, what have you been doing that all day?
Yeah, I mean, it's okay.
you think there's any
We
merits
have
to what I said?
discussions like this.
To a degree, but I want to step back one step further back and just gain perspective. So we keep on using the language like so bad, like it's terrible. The situation is terrible. It's so bad, and I think like Israel's bombing and killing. And I think it's really important to get a sense of perspective on what is actually happening. So for me, it's really important because it's my people. It's like I've got family that live there. I've got friends who've like really suffered.
Well, I don't wish ill on
No, I
those
know you
people
don't.
either.
I know
So
you-
I could
I
extend
absolutely-
my
No, absolutely. I'm not suggesting
them.
you. I'm not suggesting for a minute that you wish any ill on them, but I think perspective is really important. So what most people don't realise that in the last 5 years, less than 1,000 people have died on both sides. Yeah, we're talking a very not really
Spider on you, mate.
Yeah.
That's it. It's gone. Anti-Semitic. It doesn't want to hang out.
No,
But still there.
it's still there. It's going to get.
Where was my chain of thought going?
5 years.
5 years. Yeah. So it's
yeah.
1,000. So less than 1,000 people have died. So we're talking about this as it's the biggest humanitarian crisis, a catastrophe, something that's just caused immeasurable suffering, inflicted immeasurable suffering on so many people. Yet when we compare it to conflicts that surround it, so Syria, 500,000 dead, Iraq, 1 million dead, like in shorter spaces than 5 years.
I understand.
It actually is nowhere near as bad as the world makes out. The reason we all talk about it is because it's really important to Muslims and it's really important to Jews and Christians, Jerusalem.
Yeah.
And also,
And so-
it's entangled up with a lot of politics that have got.
I don't even think it is. I think the real root reason is religious. I think the real root of the cause, like, because there are so many conflicts that should have the, like, why is it that Israel is more politically important than the Central African Republic, where Christians and Muslims are burning each other in the street?
Or Nigeria or Sudan.
Yeah.
Because of obviously the Holy Land.
So exactly,
Yeah.
religious. That's what I'm saying. That's my thing. The whole thing comes down to religion. It's not about a humanitarian crisis, because there are humanitarian crises around the world which nobody really cares about.
Yeah.
Or if they do care about, it's in a much lesser extent.
The,
And
the language I used by saying it's a bad situation, I still stand by. It's a bad situation. Maybe what you're saying compared to the catastrophe in Syria, okay, the scale is different. What I would want to say is that it's prolific, of course, for the reasons you said, but maybe the reason why I'm emphasizing the negative aspect of it is because it doesn't show many signs of petering out. It shows signs of being reinvigorated, the conflict. That's what I mean. It's a perpetuating
I
conflict.
think, let's say what Trump says. I wouldn't be surprised if Trump solves it. Like, it sounds crazy, but like, you need a madman, like an absolute.
Well, he met with Kim Jong Un. I was very, very surprised.
So we don't know. It's the most Jared Kushner has been instrumental in it, and he knows the conflict inside out. And it's the most closely guarded secret in the White House. They're going to release it soon, and nobody knows what it is. It's not going to be the two-state solution. It's going to be something else.
Well, we can hope for a positive resolution for all.
Can I ask one question? Because obviously I've missed a lot. But when earlier you said that there was moral and legal grounds for
supporting
the occupation of the West Bank, like
what you call the occupation.
Yeah. All right. Well.
That's fine.
Yeah. Whichever language you want to use, because it's not. I don't want to use.
No, it's fine.
But what would be the moral? What are the moral?
Language of the British government.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. But what are the moral and legal grounds for that?
So it goes back to historically, I've said this a few times.
We deal with the legal first.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to say. When nations typically conquered land, they would then keep that land for themselves.
Yeah.
The League of Nations adopted a much more positive position, which was they would award the land to the indigenous people. So not the Ottoman Empire, not the Turks who had conquered it previously, but the people who were indigenous to the land. Arabs and Jews were indigenous to the land, and the Jews were promised a huge swathe of land. The British were given the mandate over Palestine, which was Jordan, West Bank, Israel, and Gaza, on the condition they create a Jewish national homeland in that region. So that gives Israel has a claim to Jordan. The first thing Israel did was give away the majority.
The unfortunate thing is we've already covered all of these points, so I would like to conclude our conversation unless you have to rehash everything for the guy here, because I don't want to just do it all again. So hopefully we've got a better understanding of each other now.
Yeah.
So it's good.
And I don't think you call me a Nazi or a racist
No,
anymore.
I certainly did. So I mean you no harm, eh? Understanding is very important.
Did you in the beginning of the conversation? Not said anymore, so I guess.
Of course not. Anyway, see you later.
Likewise.
See you later, guys.
Good stuff, Phil.
See you.
So look, when you say, because this is what because I'm kind of like, obviously, just trying to put it best way. It's like, I don't know enough, and that's the thing. And so when you
I've never heard anyone say that in Speaker's Corner. I just want to shake your hand.
That's why I'm here. And so I want to learn. There are people there are like bits and bobs of the world that I know, and there are bits and bobs I don't. Like with something like Israel, it's so unbelievably complex. It's like if I was of a left-leaning bent, and I'd be like pro-Palestinians, and obviously if I was of a right-leaning bent, I'd be like no, Israel. But I'm not of either. I think the very conception of
adopting ideas just on the basis of like flipping a coin and saying you're left or right or whatever. I think that's just nonsense. But but when you sort of said that there's legal and moral grounds, that for me kind of was like, well, I'd like to understand
the legal
that a lot
ground.
more.
The legal ground is the land was awarded to the British on the condition that they create a Jewish national
Yeah,
home.
I understand
The
the
Jews
man-
had been
yeah.
indigenous; they'd lived there for thousands of
Yeah.
years, as had many other people. And I believe that the Jews had a right to self-determination in that land. The moral argument comes from we tried living under everyone else and they slaughtered us.
Yeah.
Like we were indigenous to that land. It's where we became a nation. We're the only people that ever had a sovereign state in that region.
Yeah.
Like there was never a Palestinian state. It was always just part of the Christian empires
or
or
the Ottomans
Muslim empires.
and then
whereas
everything before
Jews-
that predated even the notion of a nation state.
Yeah, but
so-
the Jews did. The Jews had the house of it, the kingdom of Israel. They had the
Yeah.
kingdom, and so Jews have a moral and legal claim to the entire region. So all the holiest sites
But when
to
you say
Jews,
the
all the
entire region-
all the holiest sites to the Jewish people, the
Yeah.
most important sites are in the West Bank. They're not in Israel.
Well, that was always the big thing about what, from my limited understanding, was that the coastal strip is not to the Jews what is the most meaningful
Yeah,
part.
exactly. I
It's
mean,
like-
there are some important cities. There are some nice cities, but the real thing, Hebron,
Yeah.
Jerusalem,
Yeah.
these are like the contended areas.
Yeah.
It's the heartland. The West Bank is the heartland of Israel. Interesting, like Eilat, which is the little coastal city next to Egypt, that was never even part of biblical Israel.
Yeah.
It was never
So,
Israel.
because I guess it predates it all. It's places like Hebron, because obviously it's like the Jews are the first movers on so
and-
many of these like religious sites.
And there's the history is everywhere. So I think there's a moral and legal claim to the land. I think the Palestinians don't have a legal claim to the land. I think you could argue there's maybe a moral claim to create a state, whether I agree with that or
according
not.
to the UN, it's down to the population that exists there.
But what would its borders be, as an example?
Well, then what would Israel
According to you,
deciding?
the solution is to maintain the status quo.
According to me, the solution is I don't know, but my primary concern is security for Israelis and compassion for Palestinians. They're my two.
Well, you see,
driving.
that's exactly the thing I wanted to know here, and I wanted to. Maybe I didn't understand what Will was saying, but I think he didn't actually give a complex solution, an actual solution. All I hear here is that. All I hear from people is that we should we should just get along. We should just give the Palestinians more freedom. We should just give them more. No specific
his
solution.
solution was more that his solution was that Israel should effectively, I mean, he didn't put it in this words, but should leave the West Bank, should not respond in the way it does when it's under attack, and so basically be weaker militarily, like defensively, and basically cede territory to the Palestinians.
You can rephrase the weaker as being showing constraint.
I think Israel shows tremendous constraint.
Massively.
After all, I also don't agree with the argument that Israel has a higher military power than all the countries around it. Like Israel might have.
That wasn't always the case.
And
that wasn't always.
No, but I don't think it's the case even now.
I
don't think it's the case even now.
People
It might have more military power than each of those countries separated, but not than all of them together.
Equal of Israel today?
Of Israel
In the Middle East?
in the Middle East.
I don't think there is one.
I think Iran and
hard to
Hezbollah.
say.
So one of the concerns for Israel at the moment is Hezbollah. Hezbollah are battle hardened. They've been fighting ISIS in Syria. They know they're no longer just a ragtag militia. They're hardened soldiers. They've got hundreds of thousands of missiles, Iranian-built
prepared
missiles,
to go on suicide
pointing at
missions.
Israel. Yeah, prepared to go hundreds of thousands of missiles pointing at Israel. Like it doesn't matter whether Israel's a little bit stronger than Iran or Iran's a little bit. There is an existential threat to Israel on its border today.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Which is what most
Which is
countries don't ever
completely
have to live
I
with.
mean,
If
I
it
don't
was-
think
if it was
Israel
any
has
other
the
country,
luxury of
I
changing
agree.
their,
I don't think
their
any
way
country should
of
live
approaching
under
the situation a
existential
lot,
threat.
because
Like,
Israel
if
might
we
be
break
stronger
that
than
down,
each
what
of
that
the
actually
countries
means is,
separated.
like,
But it says basically, as you said, if they commit
decisions
one
could go
mistake,
wrong, you don't
that's
exist.
basically
Fear
it.
and loathing
Like,
in Israeli
like
But another thing Israel was stronger than all those countries.
all of them together.
Yeah, I'm just saying, theoretically speaking, if they were. And the argument was to make Israel weaker, and then Israel become weaker, and then they wipe them out. I'd be like, oh, didn't expect that to happen.
One of my favorite.
You know what I mean?
One of
It's
my
like,
favorite.
sorry.
One,
You know what I mean?
one of my favourite quotes was by a rabbi I actually really don't like, but it's basically,
It's like
I'd
ridiculous.
rather be a strong Jew in Israel that's hated by the world than a weak Jew in Auschwitz that's pitied by the world.
But you
and
know,
I think
yeah.
that
It's
is
a
like,
good
it's
But
like,
yeah, but the thing is, I think, in my opinion, I think that Israel or other people, I mean, you're doing it, so it's great. And I think there needs to be more people that put the side of Israel.
I mean, you do it as well.
Well, I do do a little bit. Yeah, I do do it a little bit. It's true. But it's really important because people, actually, you know what's funny? It's not that people don't have facts. People have sometimes a lot of the facts get right, like 80% of them even, right? And they'll still just it won't compute. Like it won't. It's like we don't want to die. Like we want to protect ourselves. It's like so basic, so simple, and they just come up. They just can't
Yeah,
compute.
exactly. This is why I was
it's just-
insisting so much in a specific solution. Because again, what I hear is sentimental pleads to help, to be more charitable, to be
everyone
nice.
just get
Yeah.
along.
That's not how the
it's
world
not practical.
functions.
It's not
Exactly.
practical.
That's
And
not
again,
how the world
and
functions.
I
again,
agree,
I'd
I
also
agree.
say any appeals to who's got the most military power, it's not a solution.
Yeah, I mean,
because Israel,
again,
Israel
if
could-
Israel was in a
Israel's got
position
the
of
wealth
power,
and
they
the
would be
influence
able
to-
to make a concession. But seeing that they are under threat, they can't really make a
Let's
lot of
say Israel
concessions.
gets,
But you know what? You know how you
if
look
Israel
really look.
gets like 5,000 nuclear warheads. Right, it will be the biggest power, but that's not that can't like appeals to. Oh, wouldn't it be nice if everyone just gets along? Yeah, we all want that. Like,
But I want to. So I just want to say
no
something.
one's going to contest that, and no one's going to contest whoever's got the military power. Is
Too late, man. Too late.
but it's yeah. Well, I don't know what the solution. I have just no idea how it can be solved.
Yeah.
I think the solution, one of the first steps to the actual solution. Now, according to what I heard, I've formulated somehow of a concrete solution. I think.
Is it in a poem?
No, I do have a new poem here. Maybe I'll say it later.
okay.
Maybe I'll say it later. Now, the solution I'm thinking of is to first of all find out why is all the aid, or at least from what I've heard, most of the aid to Palestine going to those terrorist organizations that are threatening Israel and are inciting violence between the two sides.
And I'll just
Why
caveat-
is it that the money's going there?
Caveat, that's particularly in Gaza. In the West Bank, they are building up infrastructure, so just some misrepresented.
Because it kind of reminds me a bit of how weapons just magically appear in eastern Ukraine. When the war is there, Putin obviously refuses that he helps them at all, and just high-tier artillery, weapons, all kinds of military personnel just magically appear there out of nowhere. It doesn't just happen magically. If they go there, if that investment goes there, then there must be cooperation between the two sides. And if you are acting in a thuggish way, you cannot expect mercy upon you. Because it's
absolutely.
You're basically waiting for the other one to turn his back to shoot him, and when he's looking at you, you're crying as a victim.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not trying to slander the Palestinians. I think they've suffered a lot, but I think the first thing to do is to find out why. Why is that happening? And when we find out why, we can start fixing the situation.
Absolutely.
By making the money actually go to the infrastructure to help the Palestinians rebuild their country, and not to fight of
surely we
fight
don't
of
need
Well,
to do
retaliation.
Hamas
that.
would not, if they had money, they would not put it into infrastructure anyway, though, because they'd put it
corruption.
they'd put it to military, to missiles. And all this.
Maybe somebody
'Cause
has
they would have to
an
vote for
interest in
somebody else,
keeping Hamas where they are, in keeping
Hamas
the war
itself
going.
obviously does.
Again,
Well,
we know,
Hamas itself
surely we know the answer
obviously
to
does.
that. Who keeps Hamas in play?
Who?
Well, it's the Iranians, isn't it?
Yeah, Iranians prop up Hamas. It's the weirdest thing. Shia and Sunni hate each other. The only thing that unifies them is hatred of Israel.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Then then maybe trying to remove all the people who are using that conflict as proxies.
that-
America's
but-
behind Israel, like
That's the
Iran
Middle
is
East,
behind,
and to be honest, I think that's the Trump deal. Like you look at Israel has stronger connections today with the Arab world than ever before in history. You have
with Saudi,
efficient
with
Israeli
Turkey,
visits
like,
to
I mean, if you compare it to the beginning of Israel,
Well, what do you
then
think of
it's
what do
not
you think
saying
of- Low
much.
bar.
It's
Lower
difficult
than
to
this
have a
body.
worse,
Yeah, exactly.
worse
Yeah,
situation.
Israel's connections with Turkey and Saudi, like,
But that's
15
a
years ago, you
strange.
would have never
That's
even
really
imagined.
strange. Israel's
Egypt.
connection
And
to
Egypt.
Saudi is strange.
Egypt sells gas to Israel.
Yeah.
There's a gas pipeline.
And Israel is now striking gas deals with like several Arab states, which is weird, selling basically oil to the Arabs. That only a Yiddish cop could do that.
Yiddish Shekov, what is that?
A Jewish head.
Jewish.
A Jewish head.
Jewish mind.
That's stupid. I don't know.
Oy vey.
Oy vey.
No,
Just kidding.
basically, I think the reality is none of us are going to get to a solution. I think the most important thing
if-
is
I mean,
recognising.
exactly.
If on Speaker's Corner we came to the solution, then that would
If
be
Speaker's Corner can't get to the solution, who can get to the solution?
You know, I wanted to kind of just try to get the solution instead of the emotional
Or at least have
walking around the
ideas of,
bush
like,
and we should all get along.
But I think that's
it's
this,
difficult.
This
it's
conflict is guided by emotions. I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
People just emotion
course.
respond.
But here's the thing.
Well,
I think
what
when
conflicts
people
aren't guided by
feel
emotions,
that
it's-
Israel
it's,
can't defend
you know,
itself, right? That is
Try living your
that
life
is
without
that is a big
emotions.
part of the
You just wander
problem.
around
That's because then Israel's constantly attacked, right? And then they can never do anything. Like today, right now, right? You correct me if I'm wrong. I asked an Israeli, said that Israel is not retaliating. So right now, Hamas, or is it finished, or is it still going?
I haven't even paid attention.
Okay.
so I
Anyway,
haven't opened the computer.
the past few weeks, anyway, they're sending rockets into Israel, and Israel's not even retaliating. Right? It's so ridiculous. Only because the world thinks, right, that Israel shouldn't retaliate. So, by the way, this is very important. When you talk about the power of Israel, you have to talk about
little country in the Mediterranean or something.
when you talk about the power of
spread
Israel, you got to look at if Israel's not able to respond for political reasons, that means they're
Come take over everything from your Come, man, say it straight. Man, don't listen to BBC. Man, don't listen to ITV.
So one of my concerns with this whole conversation is the shadowy they. We keep on talking about they, big business and various other things. And as I showed you, Piers, not so long ago, so like literally 5 minutes ago, I've got a tweet here that Piers retweeted. It was originally okay. Okay, so what